All right, today we're going to peel back the layers on one of the US government's biggest secrets, the so-called black budget. Now, you might think this is just a story about classified projects, but as the source material we're looking at suggests, it's also about trillions. Yes, trillions of dollars that have apparently just vanished. So let's start with the number that's really at the heart of this whole mystery. $22 trillion. That's the high-end estimate from researchers like the former Assistant Secretary of Housing, Katherine Austin Fitts, for how much money they claim has either been embezzled or has just plain gone missing from the U.S. government over the last few decades. To put that in perspective for you, that is almost 2/3 of the entire national debt. It's a staggering figure. And that immediately brings us to the big question, right? The one that investigators and whistleblowers have been asking for years. If that much money is missing, where in the world did it go? And maybe even more importantly, how could a system even allow for it to just disappear in the first place?
To even begin to answer that, we've got to understand how government secrecy is structured. The source material we're drawing from makes a really crucial argument. There's a huge difference between legal secrecy and something else that's operating completely outside the law. So the basic building block for all this is something called a Special Access Project, or SAP. Think of it like a locked box. Even if you have the highest top secret clearance, you can't get into this box unless you are explicitly read in on that specific project. It's how the government protects its most sensitive stuff.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The core argument from our source is that there are actually two kinds of black budgets. First, you have the legal one. It's totally constitutional, and its existence is known to the president and a small bipartisan group of senior members of Congress, often called the Gang of Eight. They're the ones briefed on the most sensitive intelligence. But the source alleges there's a second, totally illegal black budget. This one is made up of unacknowledged special access projects, and the claim is that these projects operate with absolutely zero oversight, completely unknown to the president or to Congress.
Okay, so if a parallel illegal system like that actually exists, how could it possibly get funded to the tune of trillions of dollars? Well, the source outlines several alleged ways this kind of off-the-books cash gets generated.
We're going to look at 3 of the main methods described. First up is a system of just gross overcharging, where contractors bill the government insane amounts for everyday items. Second, you have falsified contracts, where contracts are created for work that's never even done. And third, the abuse of no-bid contracts, which are handed out without any kind of competitive bidding process.
This is just a brilliant illustration of the sheer scale we're talking about with overcharging. And this isn't made up. It's a real example cited in public reports. I mean, even if you try to account for specialized manufacturing, a markup of over 80,000% is, well, it's pretty hard to justify. The argument from our source is that this isn't a mistake, it's a feature of the system, designed to funnel that excess cash into these unacknowledged projects.
Then you have what the source calls a shell game. A whistleblower from a company called SAIC claimed her office got millions for contracts that had literally no activity. She alleged their only job was to write fake progress reports for Congress, while 100% of the money, minus office overhead, just disappeared.
Okay, so this all leads to a pretty logical question. If this kind of thing is happening on such a massive scale, why don't we hear more about it? Well, the source material points directly at what happens to the people who actually try to speak out.
Take Katherine Austin Fitts. As an Assistant Secretary of Housing, her job, literally her job description, was to find waste and fraud. Well, according to the source, she was too good at it. She uncovered things that powerful people didn't want uncovered, and for her efforts, she was terminated and apparently harassed for years.
And it's not an isolated case. Here we have Lieutenant Colonel Heckert, a decorated U-2 spy plane pilot. While he was stationed at the infamous Area 51, he reportedly found some financial irregularities and did what you'd think he should do. He suggested a way to save the government money. What happened? The source claims his career was completely destroyed. So you see the pattern here, right? The source alleges a pretty clear one. The very people who are either asked to find fraud or who just stumble upon it and report it, they're the ones who get punished. And that sends a powerful message to anyone else who might be thinking of speaking up. Just stay silent.
And according to the source, this culture of punishing whistleblowers is backed up by some serious institutional roadblocks that stop any official investigation dead in its tracks, before it can even get started.
Just look at this. Every single level of oversight has allegedly been shut down. You have an external auditor from KPMG who reported that when he got to a certain point in his audit of a major defense contractor, he was just flat out told, "You don't have a need to know." Then you have the Department of Justice, blocked from prosecuting cases because they're denied the evidence. And even when Congress tried to pass a bill to give amnesty to whistleblowers, it was killed in committee.
And this quote from that auditor really it says it all. He's faced with a wall of secrecy he can't legally get past, so his only option is to just rubber stamp the books. The report goes to Congress saying, "Oh, everything's fine," when in his own words, it isn't fine.
So when you start putting all these pieces together, the missing trillions, the alleged ways it's funded, the punishment of anyone who speaks up, and these roadblocks to justice, the source material argues that this adds up to something huge, a fundamental crisis of governance. And the scale of this problem has just kept growing. Get this. On September 10th, 2001, the day before 9/11, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld publicly admitted the Pentagon couldn't account for $2.3 trillion. A few years later, sources were claiming the number was actually closer to $8.5 trillion. And today, we have that estimate of $22 trillion. So let's just recap the central claims we've explored here from the source material. The argument is that there's an illegal financial system operating beyond the Constitution, that it's funded by trillions in fraud, and that it's protected by a system of reprisal that makes it basically immune to any investigation. And maybe the most important takeaway here is that this isn't presented as some new problem. The source frames this as a systemic breakdown in the rule of law that's been operating and growing for the better part of 70 years, completely unchecked. Which leaves us with this final, really challenging question. If a system exists that is powerful enough to stop auditors, to stop the Department of Justice, and to even stop the U.S. Congress from looking into it, who in a democracy is left to hold it accountable? Thanks for tuning in.